Yajuj and Majuj, often referred to as Gog and Magog in Christian and Judaic traditions, are mentioned in various religious texts, particularly in the Quran, Hadith, and the Bible. These two tribes or groups are portrayed as beings of immense power and destruction, and they have captured the imagination of people for centuries due to their apocalyptic association. In Islamic tradition, Yajuj and Majuj are described as being locked away by the great figure of Dhul-Qarnayn, a righteous leader who, according to the Quran, built a great barrier to contain them in a remote part of the world. The barrier, which has yet to be broken, is said to prevent Yajuj and Majuj from spreading their chaos and destruction across the earth. They are destined to remain imprisoned until the end of time, when the barrier will collapse and they will be unleashed upon humanity. The Quran describes them as a people who will emerge in the time of the apocalypse, causing immense turmoil and chaos. The specific details of their appearance and behavior are vague, but they are often interpreted as representing forces of evil, corruption, and widespread disorder. In some traditions, they are seen as a symbol of anarchy and moral decay, often linked with the breakdown of societal order and the collapse of civilization. The idea of Yajuj and Majuj serves as a warning of the consequences of ignoring divine guidance and indulging in corruption and materialism. In the Bible, Yajuj and Majuj are mentioned in the book of Ezekiel and in the book of Revelation, where they are similarly depicted as destructive forces that will play a pivotal role in the events leading to the final judgment. The names Gog and Magog in these contexts refer to nations or groups that will rise against God's people in the last days, stirring conflict and leading to apocalyptic battles. Like in the Quranic account, these forces are ultimately defeated by divine intervention, marking the end of their reign of destruction. The narrative of Yajuj and Majuj has evolved into a rich symbolic motif within religious thought. They represent not just literal tribes or peoples, but also metaphorical forces that challenge divine order and threaten the well-being of the world. Throughout history, different cultures have interpreted the story in various ways, seeing in it the dangers of unchecked power, greed, and technological advancement that goes against moral and spiritual laws. This dual interpretation of Yajuj and Majuj as both literal and symbolic figures has made them central to discussions about the end of the world, offering a reflection on the human condition, our responsibility toward the earth, and our ethical obligations toward one another. Their story continues to resonate with many today as we face unprecedented challenges such as environmental degradation, geopolitical instability, and social injustice, which are often seen as the modern-day manifestations of the forces that Yajuj and Majuj represent. The tale of these two apocalyptic tribes is not just a religious story. It carries profound lessons for humanity about the need to recognize and resist destructive forces, whether they be physical, moral, or spiritual. In religious traditions, particularly within Islamic eschatology, the narrative of Yajuj and Majuj is intricately tied to the prophecy of the end times. According to the Quran, these two tribes or peoples play a crucial role in the apocalyptic events that will unfold before the day of judgment. The story begins with the figure of Dhul-Qarnayn, a great and righteous ruler mentioned in the Quran, who is entrusted with the task of containing the destructive forces of Yajuj and Majuj. Dhul-Qarnayn travels far and wide across the earth, reaching the farthest regions where he encounters these two tribes. The Quran does not offer extensive details about the nature or origin of Yajuj and Majuj, but it emphasizes their violent and corrupt nature. They are described as a people who bring destruction and chaos wherever they go, spreading corruption on the earth and leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. Upon encountering them, Dhul-Qarnayn recognizes the threat they pose and constructs a massive barrier made of iron and molten copper, which is said to keep Yajuj and Majuj confined to a remote, isolated area. The The barrier is portrayed as an impenetrable force, one that holds them at bay until a time ordained by God. The prophecy surrounding Yajuj and Majuj tells us that one day, when the end times approach, the barrier will be broken, and the tribes will be freed, unleashing their destructive power upon the world. Their release signals the final stages of the world's decline, where they will ravage the land, overwhelming nations and causing unprecedented chaos. In the Islamic tradition, the release of Yajuj and Majuj is an event foretold to occur just before the arrival of the Mahdi, the messianic figure in Islam who will lead the righteous and establish justice. The Quran does not specify the exact details of their emergence, but the Hadith, the sayings and actions of Prophet Muhammad, provide additional insights. According to various Hadiths, when the barrier falls, Yajuj and Majuj will swarm across the earth in such vast numbers that they will be unstoppable. Their rampage will be characterized by their cruelty, destruction, and disregard for any moral law, symbolizing the complete breakdown of societal order and divine harmony. The terror they bring is not just physical, but also moral, as they are seen as the embodiment of the forces that corrupt human hearts and minds, leading people away from the righteous path. The apocalyptic narrative of Yajuj and Majuj serves as a powerful reminder in Islamic thought about the inevitability of divine justice. Their release is a precursor to the final confrontation between good and evil, where the forces of righteousness will eventually triumph. In the Hadith, it is said that their rampage will be stopped only by a divine intervention, through the intervention of Prophet Isa, Jesus, and the Mahdi, who will confront these forces and restore order and justice. This signifies not only the ultimate defeat of the agents of chaos, but also the establishment of an era of peace and righteousness, marking the end of the world as we know it. The concept of Yajuj and Majuj in the end times goes beyond merely a literal interpretation of these apocalyptic beings. It represents the culmination of humanity's struggle between the forces of good and evil, a reminder that the corruption of the world will reach its peak, but ultimately divine justice will prevail. It highlights the transient nature of human civilization and the importance of maintaining moral integrity and divine consciousness in the face of overwhelming challenge. Yajuj and Majuj serve as a cautionary symbol, reminding humanity of the consequences of ignoring spiritual wisdom and allowing corruption to fester, as well as the hope that, even in the darkest times, redemption and divine intervention will restore the world to its rightful order. The narrative of Yajuj and Majuj carries profound symbolic weight, particularly when viewed through the lens of corruption and chaos. These two tribes are not merely depicted as physical beings, they represent the very essence of moral decay, greed, and the destruction of order. Their emergence from behind the barrier is often seen as a metaphor for the breakdown of societal norms and the collapse of ethical principles that hold civilizations together. In Islamic, Christian, and Judaic traditions, their story reflects the idea that unchecked evil forces, when left to grow and fester, can eventually break free from the boundaries that once contained them, overwhelming the world in a torrent of destruction. The destructive nature of Yajuj and Majuj is not just about their physical prowess or military strength. It is the embodiment of chaos, an uncontrolled force that consumes everything in its path, leaving no space for justice, compassion, or morality. They are often understood as the manifestation of humanity's deepest flaws: greed, selfishness, and the relentless pursuit of power at any cost. The emergence of Yajuj and Majuj signifies a time when societal structures once meant to safeguard truth, fairness, and equity begin to crumble. As they spread across the world, these forces bring with them not just physical destruction, but a moral rot that permeates every facet of life. Communities become fractured, trust disintegrates, and the collective will to uphold justice and righteousness erodes. people become slaves to materialism, losing sight of the deeper truths that once bound them together. In this sense, Yajuj and Majuj are symbolic of the rise of corruption that can infiltrate even the most righteous of societies. They are a reflection of the consequences of ignoring divine wisdom and succumbing to the temptations of earthly power. They stand as a warning of what can happen when human beings prioritize selfish desires over the welfare of others and disregard the spiritual and moral guidance that has been passed down through generations. The chaos they bring is not just external, but internal as well. An internal struggle that drives people away from compassion, justice, and unity. This narrative is not merely relegated to ancient times or religious stories, but resonates deeply with the world today. It serves as a mirror to contemporary society where corruption, greed, and environmental degradation threaten to overwhelm the world. Just as Yajuj and Majuj are said to break free and wreak havoc upon the earth, the unchecked forces of industrialization, environmental destruction, and political corruption can be seen as modern-day manifestations of the same chaos. The exploitation of natural resources without regard for the future, the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few, and the erosion of ethical values in the pursuit of personal gain all mirror the destructive influence of Yajuj and Majuj. The story of Yajuj and Majuj warns of the danger of complacency in the face of growing corruption. Dulkarnain's construction of the barrier symbolizes the efforts made by societies to create systems of protection against such forces. However, these systems, no matter how strong they seem, can only hold back corruption for so long. The barrier will eventually break, just as the systems that guard against moral and environmental collapse may fail under the weight of human greed and negligence. The emergence of Yajuj and Majuj is a clear reminder that if these forces are not kept in check, they will eventually break through and lead the world into chaos and destruction. The story urges vigilance and responsibility, highlighting that the failure to address corruption, whether political, social, or environmental, leads to devastating consequences. The concept of game over in relation to the story of Yajuj and Majuj carries a profound and ominous significance, especially when interpreted as a metaphor for the collapse of civilization and the irreversible consequences of unchecked corruption. Game over is not just a casual expression of failure, but rather a stark reminder of the irreversible point of no return. In the context of Yajuj and Majuj, it represents the moment when humanity's disregard for moral, spiritual, and environmental laws reaches its climax. Their emergence from behind the barrier signals a final tipping point, when the forces of destruction have been allowed to spread so far and wide that there is no longer any chance for redemption through human effort alone. It's as if the game of human civilization has been played recklessly, and now the end has arrived. All actions taken previously, all attempts to restore balance, have been overshadowed by the overwhelming force of chaos and corruption that is now unleashed. The symbolism of game over evokes the sense that there are moments in the life of any society or civilization when it reaches a threshold beyond which recovery is impossible. It's a warning that there are points in history where the decisions made by leaders and individuals, the collective pursuit of greed and self-interest, and the neglect of moral and spiritual duties can lead to a breakdown of order so profound that it becomes irreversible. The idea of game over suggests that once these forces of destruction, represented by Yajuj and Majuj, are set loose, they will destroy not just the physical world but the moral and spiritual fabric of society. It is a final, devastating loss of the values that once held the world together. In the narrative of Yajuj and Majuj, this is the moment when human efforts to contain evil and restore balance will fail, When examining the significance of game over, it becomes apparent that it is not just a call for the end of one chapter, but a statement about the fragility of human civilization. Like a game that can be lost due to poor choices, ignorance, and neglect, the destruction brought by Yajuj and Majuj is a reflection of how society can falter when its leaders and individuals fail to act with foresight, wisdom, and compassion. The moment they break through their barrier is symbolic of the consequences of allowing corruption, greed, and moral decay to grow unchecked, until the point where there is no longer any opportunity for redemption. The concept of game over reminds us that there are finite limits to how much the world can endure before it spirals out of control. In a broader context, game over serves as a cautionary reminder of the potential downfall of humanity when we fail to heed the lessons of history and spirituality. Whether in the form of environmental degradation, social injustice, or political corruption, the forces of Yajuj and Majuj are representative of the destructive forces that we as a society have the power to either resist or exacerbate. If we continue on the path of moral neglect and environmental exploitation, we may one day face our own game over moment, when the systems that hold us together collapse and the consequences of our actions become unavoidable. It's a call to recognize that while civilization may seem invincible at times, there is always the danger of a tipping point where all is lost and the forces of chaos take over. Thus, the significance of game over in the story of Yajuj and Majuj is a stark reminder of the need for vigilance, responsibility, and a return to fundamental values. The consequences of our actions, when allowed to reach a point of no return, can lead to irreversible destruction, making the concept of game over not just a symbol of finality, but also a wake-up call. It urges humanity to recognize the urgency of addressing the forces that threaten to unravel the world before it's too late. The narrative of Yajuj and Majuj offers profound lessons for humanity, extending beyond its religious and apocalyptic context to provide valuable insights into the dangers of unchecked corruption, the importance of vigilance, and the need for unity and justice in the face of global challenge. One of the primary lessons from this story is the inevitable consequence of ignoring moral and spiritual guidance. The people of Yajuj and Majuj, with their rampant corruption and disregard for ethical principles, are not merely depicted as agents of destruction, but also as a reflection of humanity's potential downfall when it abandons righteousness. The tale serves as a warning that when societies allow greed, selfishness, and cruelty to dominate their actions, they set the stage for their own collapse. This applies not just to individual actions, but to the broader societal and environmental systems in place. The unchecked accumulation of power, wealth, and resources without any consideration for the common good mirrors the very traits that define Yajuj and Majuj, and ultimately lead to their release into the world. Another key lesson is the importance of foresight and the need to take proactive measures to address emerging threats before they become overwhelming. Dulkarnain, the righteous leader who contained Yajuj and Majuj, represents the wisdom and responsibility of leaders to safeguard their people against destructive forces. The barrier he built symbolizes the efforts needed to protect society from corruption and chaos. However, the fact that the barrier will eventually break reminds us that no system of protection is invincible. It underscores the importance of maintaining constant vigilance and adapting to evolving threats. It teaches that even when we have safeguards in place, we must remain prepared to act when circumstances change and new challenges arise. In the modern context, this could be understood as the responsibility of governments, organizations, and individuals to address issues such as climate change, inequality, and political instability before they spiral out of control. The story of Yajuj and Majuj also stresses the necessity of collective action. Dulkarnain did not build the barrier alone. His efforts were part of a greater collective will to protect and preserve what was good and just in the world. This reflects the power of cooperation and the shared responsibility we have to one another in times of crisis. The narrative suggests that the forces of destruction, represented by Yajuj and Majuj, can only be kept at bay when there is unity, both within societies and across nations. In today's world, where global challenges are increasingly interconnected, the lesson of collective action is particularly relevant. Issues such as climate change, economic disparity, and global conflict require international cooperation and solidarity, just as the forces of Yajuj and Majuj can only be held at bay through collective effort and shared responsibility. The tale highlights the critical importance of maintaining moral and spiritual integrity, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. The people who face the destructive forces of Yajuj and Majuj are ultimately tested in their ability to hold on to their values and principles in a world that seems to be descending into chaos. This is a call for inner strength and resilience, a reminder that even when external circumstances seem beyond repair, maintaining one's commitment to truth, justice, and righteousness is the key to enduring the most difficult times. The narrative teaches that while the forces of corruption and destruction may have the power to bring physical ruin, they cannot completely destroy the spiritual and moral strength of individuals and communities who remain steadfast in their principles. The story of Yajuj and Majuj offers a sobering reflection on the impermanence of human civilizations. The barrier built by Dulkarnain is not permanent, just as no system, no matter how well constructed, can withstand the test of time without continual care, adaptation, and renewal. This teaches us about the transient nature of human accomplishments and the need for humility in the face of our achievements. Societies that grow complacent, resting on their past successes without addressing present challenges, risk unraveling when faced with unforeseen crises. The story challenges us to think beyond our immediate surroundings and to consider the long-term consequences of our actions, urging us to build systems and structures that not only survive in the short term, but contribute to the sustainability and health of future generations. The narrative also carries a message of hope. Despite the inevitable destruction, the eventual intervention by divine forces to stop Yajuj and Majuj and restore peace and justice suggests that even in the darkest times, there is always the potential for redemption and the restoration of balance. It reminds us that even though corruption and chaos may seem overwhelming, there is always hope for renewal and a return to justice as long as humanity recognizes its mistakes, seeks guidance, and takes action toward change. The story of Yajuj and Majuj, therefore, is not just about an impending end, but also about the opportunity for humanity to learn, grow, and avert disaster through wisdom, vigilance, and unity. The concept of game over serves as a stark and urgent call to action, urging humanity to recognize the dire consequences of inaction in the face of rising global crises. It is a warning that if we continue on our current trajectory, driven by unchecked greed, corruption, and environmental degradation, we risk reaching a point of no return, where all efforts to restore balance and justice will be futile. This moment of irreversible collapse, symbolized by the release of Yajuj and Majuj, reminds us that the forces of destruction are already at work in our world, whether in the form of political instability, environmental ruin, or the erosion of ethical value. The game over moment, however, is not set in stone. It is not an inevitability, but a possibility that we can prevent through collective action, foresight, and a commitment to justice. The first step in preventing the game over is acknowledging the power we have as individuals, communities, and nations to influence change. Too often we underestimate our ability to create positive transformation or believe that the problems we face are too large or complex for us to address. However, the narrative of Yajuj and Majuj teaches us that the smallest of efforts, if made collectively, can have a profound impact on the larger outcome. Just as Dul-Qarnain took responsibility to build the barrier that would protect his people, we must take responsibility for safeguarding our world from the forces of chaos and destruction. This requires us to address the global issues that threaten our future, from climate change and resource depletion to political corruption and social inequality. By uniting around shared values of justice, compassion, and sustainability, we can begin to build the necessary barriers against these destructive forces. Preventing the game over also calls for a shift in mindset from a focus on short-term gain to long-term well-being. Many of the current systems that drive the world forward are based on the exploitation of resources and people for immediate profit, often with little regard for the future. The pursuit of material wealth, power, and individual success at the expense of the planet and future generations has placed humanity at the brink of disaster. To prevent the point of no return, we must adopt sustainable practices that protect the environment, promote social equity, and prioritize the well-being of all people over personal gain. This means shifting away from industries and practices that harm the planet and embracing alternative energy sources, responsible consumption, and ethical governance. It is also critical to address the growing moral and spiritual decay that underpins much of the chaos we face today. The breakdown of values such as empathy, justice, and integrity has led to widespread corruption and inequality. The tale of Yajuj and Majuj teaches us that when people lose sight of these core values, they contribute to the unraveling of the social fabric. To avoid game over, we must restore these values within ourselves, our communities, and our institutions. This requires us to cultivate compassion, fairness, and respect for all living beings, and to actively resist the temptations of materialism and self-interest. By nurturing spiritual and moral growth, we can rebuild societies that are grounded in justice and harmony. Another key action in preventing game over is fostering collaboration across borders. In the story of Yajuj and Majuj, the forces of destruction cannot be contained by isolated efforts. They require a collective response. Today, the challenges we face are global in nature. Climate change, pandemics, economic inequality, and geopolitical instability transcend national boundaries and require cooperative solutions. This calls for nations to work together, prioritizing global welfare over national interests. It means breaking down barriers that divide us, whether political, racial, or economic, and recognizing that the survival of one is tied to the survival of all. We must build a global community that is committed to peace, cooperation, and the common good, uniting to tackle shared threats and create a more just and sustainable world. Lastly, preventing the game over requires a deep commitment to education, awareness, and action. The challenges we face cannot be solved without the active participation of every individual. We must educate ourselves and others about the importance of environmental stewardship, social justice, and ethical governance. We must empower individuals to recognize their role in shaping the future and to take action in their own communities. Whether through voting, activism, or everyday choices, every person can contribute to the collective effort to prevent disaster. The story of Yajuj and Majuj serves as a reminder that the seeds of destruction grow over time, but so too do the seeds of change. It is up to us to decide which seeds we will sow and whether we will work toward a future of justice, peace, and sustainability, or continue down a path that leads to inevitable collapse. The time to act is now. The forces of destruction, represented by Yajuj and Majuj, are already present in many forms, but they can be stopped if we choose to build the barriers of justice, unity, and wisdom. If we unite, take responsibility, and work together with a shared sense of purpose, we can avoid the game over and create a world where the values of compassion, sustainability, and equity prevail. The future is not predetermined. It is shaped by the actions we take today. The choice is ours, and it is time to make it. In conclusion, the narrative of Yajuj and Majuj serves as both a warning and a call to action, urging us to confront the destructive forces of corruption, greed, and moral decay before they consume our world. The concept of game over reminds us that there is a tipping point where the consequences of our actions, both individually and collectively, become irreversible. However, the end is not inevitable. We have the power to build the barriers of justice, compassion, and unity that can protect our societies from the chaos that threatens to unravel them. It is up to each of us to recognize our role in shaping the future, to act with foresight and responsibility, and to work together in the spirit of cooperation and sustainability. If we heed the lessons of this powerful narrative, we can avoid the game over and instead create a world that thrives on ethical values, peace, and the well-being of all. The time to act is now. Let us rise to the challenge and prevent the darkness before it takes hold. The future is in our hands, and it is our responsibility to ensure that we leave a legacy of hope, unity, and justice for generations to come.